Chapter 3, Mishnah 6. This Mishnah discusses the food status of certain underdeveloped fruits in regard to both food tuma and Meiser Rishon. Underdeveloped fruit and unripe fruit. Rabbi Akiva rules that they can become tamei with food tuma. Although they are only slightly edible at this stage, they are considered food in regard to tuma. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says they cannot become tamei until a later stage of growth, which is when they reach the stage of Meiser, i.e. the stage at which they become subject to the obligation to separate Turumas and Meisros from them. At that point, the fruit is developed enough to be somewhat edible to most people, and is thus considered food with regard to the obligation of Trumas and Meisros. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, it is only at this point that a fruit is considered developed enough to become tamei with food tuma. In his view, the stage of development that a fruit must reach to be considered food is the same for both the Meiser obligation and for tuma. In the previous case, the dispute was about fruits that have not yet reached their full stage of development. The Mishnah now teaches the law for fruits that will never reach their full stage of development. Here too there is a dispute about the matter. Hard olives and grapes, i.e. olives and grapes that stopped developing on a tree or vine before they became fully ripe, and so did not soften the way olives and grapes usually do as they ripen. Beis Shammai rule that they are tamei, i.e. subject to food tuma, but Beis Hillel rule that they are tahor, i.e. not subject to food tuma. Beis Shammai rule that hard olives and grapes are considered food because they are soft enough to produce some oil and wine. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, argue that these olives and grapes are not considered food because they will not be used by most people. Another dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel whether something is considered food. Ketz, a black seed used to flavor bread. Beis Shammai rule that it is tahor, not subject to food tuma, because it is not eaten by itself and it is therefore not considered a food. But Beis Hillel rule that it is tamei, subject to food tuma, because it is eaten together with the bread, which gives it the status of food. The Mishnah has just presented two disputes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about the status of certain foods in regard to food tuma. The Mishnah now teaches the law for these two foods in regard to Meiser. And similarly, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagree in regard to the law of Meisros, which also apply only to food. Beis Shammai, who exempts these items from food tuma, also exempt them from the obligation to separate Meiser from them, since they are not considered food according to them. Beis Hillel consider these items food in regard to food tuma, also consider them subject to the Meiser obligation.